Chuck Norris wasn't just an ordinary man. He was someone who had lived through countless adventures, faced danger head-on, and always come out on top. This time, however, his mission required something different. Not brute strength or flashy moves, but subtlety and patience. His assignment was to go undercover at the Skyview Heights Hotel, a place known for its luxury and exclusivity. It was rumored that a secretive group was using the hotel as a front for illegal activities. Chuck's job was to find out what they were up to and put a stop to it. To blend in, Chuck adopted the identity of John Carter, a traveling businessman attending a conference on renewable energy. He wore a plain gray suit that didn't quite fit his rugged frame, paired with a tie that looked like it had been hastily chosen. In one hand, he carried a sleek black briefcase filled with fake documents designed to make him look like any other attendee. But no matter how hard he tried to appear ordinary, there was one thing about him that stood out: his boots. Chuck's cowboy boots weren't just any boots. They were polished leather, sturdy, and unmistakably unique. These boots had seen more action than most people could imagine, carrying him across deserts, mountains, and battlefields. For Chuck, they were more than footwear. They were a symbol of who he was. Unfortunately, in this setting, they made him stick out like a sore thumb. When Chuck arrived at the hotel, he couldn't help but feel impressed by its grandeur. The entrance was lined with tall columns, and inside, the lobby sparkled with marble floors and golden accents. Chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, casting warm light over everything. People bustled about, chatting quietly or checking their phones. Some wore expensive suits, while others sported designer dresses. Everyone seemed to belong here except for him. Or so he thought. He approached the front desk where a young woman named Lisa greeted him with a polite smile. She had short brown hair tucked behind her ears and wore thin-framed glasses perched on her nose. Her name tag read Lisa Thompson, and she looked every bit the part of a professional hotel employee. However, her expression changed the moment she noticed Chuck's boots. "Checking in?" she asked, her voice smooth but tinged with curiosity. "Yes, ma'am," Chuck replied, tipping his cowboy hat slightly. "Name's John Carter." Lisa typed his name into the computer, glancing down at his boots again. "Are those real leather?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Her tone wasn't exactly rude, but it carried a hint of judgment. Chuck hesitated for a split second before nodding. "Sure are," he said confidently. "They've served me well over the years." Lisa gave him a tight-lipped smile. "Interesting. Choice for a business trip," she remarked, handing him his room key. "Enjoy your stay, Mr. Carter." As Chuck walked away, he felt a strange sensation creeping up his spine. Those few seconds at the front desk had left him unsettled. He wasn't used to being judged, especially not by something as trivial as his footwear. Still, he reminded himself why he was here. This wasn't about fitting in perfectly. It was about getting answers. Once upstairs, Chuck settled into his room. It was spacious, with a king-sized bed, a plush armchair, and a balcony overlooking the city. He opened the curtains and stared outside, taking in the view. Below, cars zipped along busy streets and pedestrians hurried to their destinations. From up here, it all seemed so small, almost insignificant compared to the weight of his mission. But Chuck knew better than to let his guard down. Something about the hotel and Lisa's reaction to his boots felt off. He decided to do a little exploring. After freshening up, he headed back downstairs to check out the conference area. The event hadn't started yet, but attendees were already gathering in small groups, exchanging business cards and discussing topics ranging from solar panels to wind turbines. Chuck wandered around, pretending to be interested in the displays set up around the room. There were posters showcasing new technologies, models of futuristic buildings, and even interactive screens demonstrating how renewable energy worked. Despite the educational nature of the exhibits, Chuck couldn't shake the feeling that something darker lurked beneath the surface. While examining one of the displays, he overheard snippets of conversation between two men nearby. One of them mentioned something called Project Titan, though he quickly lowered his voice when another person passed by. Chuck's ears perked up at the mention of the phrase. Project Titan? What could that mean? Before he could investigate further, a woman approached him. She introduced herself as Rachel, a journalist covering the conference. She had shoulder-length blonde hair and carried a notebook in one hand. Her demeanor was friendly but cautious, as if she were sizing him up. "So, Mr. Carter," she began, "what brings you to this conference?" Chuck gave her a practiced answer about his interest in sustainable energy solutions. Rachel nodded politely but didn't seem entirely convinced. Instead of pressing him further, she excused herself, saying she needed to speak with someone else. As she walked away, Chuck noticed her glance back at him briefly, her expression unreadable. By the end of the day, Chuck returned to his room feeling both intrigued and wary. The hotel was beautiful, yes, but it also held secrets that might involve more than just renewable energy. And then there was the matter of his boots. Why had Lisa reacted so strongly to them? Was it simply a matter of fashion, or was there something deeper at play? As he sat on the edge of his bed, Chuck allowed himself a moment of reflection. He'd faced countless challenges throughout his life, but this one felt different. Here, in this opulent setting, surrounded by strangers with hidden agendas, he realized that sometimes the smallest details could reveal the biggest truths. Whether it was his boots drawing unwanted attention or whispers of mysterious projects, Chuck knew one thing for certain. He was on to something big, and he wouldn't rest until he uncovered the truth. The next morning, Chuck woke up early and decided to attend the conference session scheduled for the day. He figured it would be a good way to blend in while keeping an eye out for anything suspicious. As he entered the grand ballroom where the event was being held, he noticed how busy it already was. Attendees were scattered across the large space, some sitting at round tables listening to speakers, others standing near booths showcasing new technologies. Chuck grabbed a cup of coffee from a nearby station and found a seat along the edge of the room. Not long after settling down, a man approached him. His name tag read Matt Harris, and he had a confident smile that seemed to charm everyone around him. Matt wore an expensive navy blue suit, and his tie was perfectly knotted. He extended his hand toward Chuck. "Hey there," Matt said warmly. "I'm Matt. First time here?" Chuck shook his hand firmly. "John Carter," he replied. "Yeah, first time. Just trying to learn more about renewable energy." "Well, you've come to the right place," Matt said, pulling up a chair without waiting for an invitation. "This conference always brings together some of the brightest minds in the industry. What do you do, John?" Chuck gave his rehearsed answer about working as a consultant for green energy projects. Matt nodded thoughtfully, but didn't seem fully convinced. Instead of pressing further, he changed the subject. "Nice boots, by the way," Matt commented, glancing down at Chuck's feet. "They look like they've seen some action." Chuck chuckled lightly. "You could say that. They've been with me through thick and thin." Matt grinned. "Got any stories behind them?" Chuck hesitated. He didn't want to reveal too much, so he kept his response vague. "Let's just say these boots have taken me places most people wouldn't dare go." Matt raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Sounds adventurous. You'll have to tell me more sometime." For the rest of the session, Matt stuck close to Chuck, introducing him to other attendees and making small talk. While Matt seemed friendly enough, Chuck couldn't shake the feeling that the man was studying him closely. Every question Matt asked felt like a test, and every comment carried an undertone of curiosity that went beyond casual interest. Later that afternoon, during a break between presentations, Chuck decided to grab another cup of coffee. He headed to the hotel's lounge, a quieter spot away from the bustling conference area. The lounge had a relaxed vibe, with comfortable leather chairs and low lighting. Chuck chose a seat near the window where he could observe the room while remaining inconspicuous. As he sipped his coffee, he noticed Matt again, this time talking to a blonde woman who had caught Chuck's attention earlier. Rachel. She had introduced herself as a journalist the previous day, though something about her demeanor suggested she might be more than that. Now she stood leaning against the bar, scrolling through her phone, though her eyes occasionally flicked toward Chuck. Matt leaned closer to Rachel, lowering his voice. Though Chuck couldn't hear everything they said, he managed to catch a few words. That guy over there, the one with the boots, Matt whispered. Something's off about him. Rachel glanced briefly in Chuck's direction before turning, back to Matt. What makes you say that? I don't know yet, Matt admitted, but I'm going to find out. Chuck tensed slightly but forced himself to remain calm. He knew better than to react visibly. Instead, he focused on blending into the background, pretending to read a brochure left on the table. Still, the conversation worried him. If Matt became too curious, it could jeopardize his mission. After finishing his coffee, Chuck decided to take a walk around the hotel. He wanted to familiarize himself with the layout and see if he could spot anything unusual. The Skyview Heights hotel was massive with multiple floors, countless rooms, and several restricted areas marked with signs warning guests not to enter. One such area caught Chuck's attention, a hallway on the second floor that led to a locked door labeled Staff Only. Curiosity got the better of him, and he waited until no one was looking before slipping past the sign. The corridor beyond was dimly lit, with walls painted a dull gray. At the end of the hall, Chuck found a keypad guarding the locked door. It looked advanced, requiring a code or key card to open. He made a mental note of its location, knowing it might be worth investigating later. On his way back to the main part of the hotel, Chuck ran into Lisa, the receptionist who had judged his boots the day before. She looked surprised to see him, wandering alone. "Mr. Carter," she said coolly. "Lost?" "Nope," Chuck replied smoothly. "Just stretching my legs. This place is huge." Lisa studied him for a moment, her gaze lingering on his boots once again. "Indeed," she said. "Be careful where you wander, though. Some parts of the hotel aren't meant for guests." Her tone carried a warning, but Chuck simply smiled. "Thanks for the tip," he said, brushing past her as if unfazed. By evening, Chuck returned to the conference area for the final session of the day. To his relief, Matt wasn't around, giving him a chance to focus on gathering information. During the presentation, a speaker mentioned advancements in robotics technology, hinting at potential applications in various industries. Chuck listened intently, connecting the dots between what he'd heard earlier about Project Titan and the secretive nature of the hotel staff. When the session ended, Chuck mingled with a few attendees, asking casual questions about the latest trends in renewable energy. Most responses were predictable, but one man, an older gentleman with glasses and a lab coat, offered something intriguing. "The future isn't just about energy," the man said cryptically. "It's about efficiency. Machines will do what humans can't." Before Chuck could ask him to elaborate, the man excused himself, disappearing into the crowd. Chuck stared after him, his mind racing. Was this connected to Project Titan? And if so, what exactly were they building? Back in his room that night, Chuck reviewed everything he'd learned. Between Matt's probing questions, Lisa's warnings, and the mysterious locked door, it was clear that the hotel hid secrets far beyond what met the eye. Yet, despite the mounting tension, Chuck felt a spark of excitement. He thrived in situations like this, where danger and mystery intertwined. He glanced down at his boots, still gleaming despite hours of walking. They reminded him of all the challenges he'd faced and overcome throughout his life. No matter what lay ahead, Chuck knew one thing for certain: he was ready. The next day, Chuck decided to focus more on uncovering the secrets hidden within the Skyview Heights Hotel. He knew he couldn't rely solely on casual conversations or observations. He needed concrete evidence. That meant taking risks, and one risk stood out above the rest: the locked door on the second floor. It had been nagging at him since he first spotted it, and now he was determined to find out what lay behind it. Chuck began his morning by attending another conference session, this time making sure to stay visible among the crowd. He didn't want anyone growing suspicious of his movements. While listening to a speaker talk about advancements in artificial intelligence, Chuck kept half an eye on Matt and Rachel, who were seated nearby. They seemed engrossed in their own conversation, occasionally glancing toward him but not approaching. For now, he appeared to be safe. After the session ended, Chuck lingered in the lobby, pretending to check messages on his phone while keeping track of Lisa at the front desk. She was busy assisting other guests, giving him the perfect opportunity to slip away unnoticed. With practiced ease, he made his way back to the restricted area on the second floor. The hallway leading to the locked door felt different during the day. The dim lighting created an unsettling atmosphere, and the red carpet beneath his boots muffled every step he took. Chuck moved quietly, his senses sharp as he scanned the surroundings. A security camera mounted near the ceiling swiveled slowly, its lens scanning the corridor. He waited patiently until it turned away before darting closer to the door. Standing in front of the keypad, Chuck studied it carefully. It was a standard electronic lock, requiring either a code or a keycard to open. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device he'd brought along, a gadget capable of bypassing such locks. Chuck wasn't proud of using tools like this, but sometimes necessity outweighed ethics. Carefully, he attached the device to the keypad and waited. Seconds ticked by as the gadget worked its magic. Then, with a soft click, the door unlocked. Chuck pushed it open just wide enough to slip inside, closing it gently behind him. What he saw next left him stunned. The room beyond the door was unlike anything he'd expected. Instead of storage shelves or maintenance equipment, it housed rows of sleek metallic machines. Each machine resembled a humanoid robot, standing motionless against the wall. Their designs were eerily lifelike, with joints that looked flexible and faces devoid of emotion. Chuck approached one cautiously, examining it closely. A tag on its chest read Titan Model X. As he walked deeper into the room, Chuck noticed workstations scattered around, each equipped with computers displaying complex schematics. On one screen, he saw blueprints detailing how these robots could mimic human behavior: walking, talking, even fighting. Another monitor showed data related to autonomous decision-making algorithms. Whatever Project Titan was, it involved creating advanced robotic systems designed to replace humans in dangerous tasks, or worse. Suddenly, Chuck heard faint voices coming from somewhere deeper in the facility. He froze, his instincts kicking in. Ducking behind a workstation, he listened intently. Two men entered the room, both dressed in lab coats. One carried a clipboard, while the other held a tablet displaying live feeds from cameras throughout the hotel. "These prototypes are nearly ready," the man with the clipboard said. "Dr. Harper wants them operational within the week." "Operational for what?" the other man asked nervously. "You know we're pushing boundaries here. If anyone finds out—" "They won't," the first man interrupted sharply. "And if they do, we'll deal with it. Now, let's finish running diagnostics." Chuck stayed hidden, his mind racing. Dr. Harper must be the mastermind behind Project Titan. From what he overheard, these robots weren't just tools, they were weapons. Weapons that could think and act independently. The implications sent a chill down his spine. Once the two men left the room, Chuck quickly snapped photos of the blueprints and notes left on the workstations. He also recorded video footage of the robots, ensuring he had enough evidence to expose the operation. But as he prepared to leave, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed overhead, bathing the room in an ominous glow. Chuck cursed under his breath, realizing he'd triggered some kind of security system when accessing the door earlier. Without hesitation, he bolted toward the exit, weaving between the rows of robots as shouts echoed from outside. He burst through the door just as armed guards rounded the corner. They shouted orders, raising their weapons. Chuck reacted instantly, ducking into a nearby alcove. Using his agility, he disarmed the first guard with a swift kick, sending the man sprawling to the ground. The second guard lunged at him, but Chuck sidestepped effortlessly, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it until he dropped his weapon. More guards arrived, forcing Chuck to retreat further into the hotel. He navigated the labyrinthine corridors, relying on his memory of the layout to evade capture. Eventually, he found himself back in the main lobby, where chaos erupted as staff scrambled to figure out what was happening. Amid the confusion, Chuck spotted Rachel standing near the entrance. Her eyes widened when she saw him and she beckoned him over urgently. "We need to talk," she whispered, pulling him aside. "I know you're not who you say you are." Chuck hesitated, unsure whether to trust her. but something in her tone suggested she wasn't working against him. "You're right," he admitted, "but I'm here for a reason. Those robots, they're part of something bigger." Rachel nodded grimly. "I've been investigating this place for weeks. This isn't just about renewable energy, it's about control. And if we don't stop them, things will get ugly." Together they slipped out of the hotel and into the safety of the parking lot. As they caught their breath, Chuck glanced back at the building, his expression grim. "This isn't over," he said firmly. "Not by a long shot." With Rachel now on his side, Chuck knew they had a better chance of exposing the truth. But the road ahead would be dangerous, filled with enemies who wouldn't hesitate to silence them permanently. Still, Chuck had faced tougher odds before, and he wasn't about to back down now. Chuck and Rachel didn't have much time to waste. After escaping the chaos in the hotel lobby, they found themselves in the parking lot trying to catch their breath. The alarms had stopped blaring, but they knew the danger wasn't over. Whoever was behind Project Titan would be hunting them now, determined to protect their secrets at any cost. Chuck turned to Rachel, his expression serious. "What do you know about this place?" he asked. "And don't leave anything out." Rachel hesitated, then nodded. "I've been undercover here for weeks," she admitted. "At first, I thought it was just corporate corruption, money laundering or something like that. But then I started hearing whispers about Project Titan. When I tried to dig deeper, I hit a wall. People who asked too many questions disappeared." Chuck frowned. "Disappeared?" "Yeah," Rachel said grimly. "One day they're here, the next they're gone. No explanations, no trace. That's when I realized this operation goes way beyond what anyone suspects." Chuck thought about the robots he'd seen in the hidden lab. They weren't just machines. They were weapons. Autonomous, intelligent weapons capable of replacing human soldiers. If these prototypes fell into the wrong hands, the consequences could be catastrophic. "We need to shut this down," Chuck said firmly. "But we can't do it alone. Do you know anyone else we can trust?" Rachel shook her head. "Not yet. Most of the staff are either clueless or too scared to talk. There's one person, though, a tech guy named Alex. He works in IT and might know more about the systems running those robots. If we can get to him, he might help us." "Then let's find him," Chuck replied. They returned to the hotel cautiously, avoiding the main entrances. Instead, they slipped through a service door that led to the basement. It was dark and damp down there, with pipes running along the ceiling and stacks of crates lining the walls. Emergency lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows across the space. As they moved deeper into the basement, they heard voices echoing from around a corner. Ducking behind a stack of crates, they peeked out to see several armed guards patrolling the area. Clearly, security had been tightened after Chuck's earlier intrusion. "This isn't going to be easy," Rachel whispered. "No kidding," Chuck muttered. "But we don't have a choice." He scanned the area, looking for a way to bypass the guards without drawing attention. Spotting a narrow passageway blocked by a chain-link fence, he gestured for Rachel to follow him. Together, they squeezed through a gap in the fence and made their way toward a set of stairs leading upward. Just as they reached the base of the stairs, one of the guards spotted them. "Hey, stop right there," the guard shouted, raising his weapon. Chuck reacted instantly, grabbing a nearby pipe and hurling it at the guard. The makeshift projectile struck the man's arm, causing him to drop his gun. Before the other guards could react, Chuck charged forward, using his speed and strength to disarm them one by one. Rachel stayed close, picking up a fallen weapon and keeping watch while Chuck handled the fight. When the last guard fell unconscious, Chuck glanced at Rachel. "Nice work," he said. "You too," she replied, breathing heavily. "Now let's move before backup arrives." They hurried upstairs, following Rachel's directions to the IT department. Along the way, they passed through another restricted area, this time finding themselves in a smaller lab filled with computer servers and monitors. In the center of the room stood Alex, a young man with messy hair and glasses perched on his nose. He looked startled when they burst in. "Whoa, who are you guys?" Alex exclaimed, backing away nervously. "No time to explain," Rachel said quickly. "We need your help. Those robots, they're part of something bigger, aren't they?" Alex hesitated, glancing toward the door as if expecting someone to walk in. Finally, he sighed. Okay, fine. But you didn't hear this from me, got it? Those robots are prototypes for autonomous combat units. They're designed to replace human soldiers in warfare. The project is funded by some seriously shady people. Chuck stepped closer. Can you disable them? It's not that simple, Alex explained. The entire system is controlled by a central server located in the main lab. If you destroy that, you'll shut everything down, but getting to it won't be easy. It's heavily guarded, Chuck nodded. Then we'll have to take our chances. Before they could make a plan, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. More guards were coming. Alex panicked. You've got to go, he urged. If they catch you here, we're all dead. Come with us, Rachel insisted. I can't, Alex replied. If I leave, they'll know I helped you. Just promise me you'll stop them. Reluctantly, Chuck and Rachel agreed. As they slipped out of the room, Alex typed furiously on his keyboard, presumably erasing any evidence of their visit. Back in the hallway, Chuck and Rachel prepared for another confrontation. Armed guards rounded the corner, blocking their path. Chuck squared his shoulders, ready to fight. Stay close, he told Rachel. The guards opened fire, forcing Chuck and Rachel to dive for cover behind a row of crates. Bullets ricocheted off the metal containers as Chuck assessed the situation. There were too many guards for him to take on alone, which meant they needed a distraction. Rachel, he whispered. Do you still have that gun? She nodded, handing it to him. Good. Cover me while I create an opening. With that, Chuck sprang into action. Leaping over the crates, he charged straight at the guards, dodging bullets with incredible agility. One by one, he disarmed them, using their own weapons against them. Meanwhile, Rachel provided covering, fire, keeping the remaining guards pinned down. When the coast was clear, Chuck signaled for Rachel to follow him. Together, they raced toward the main lab, where the central server awaited. The door was locked, but Chuck used his gadget once again to bypass the keypad. Inside, they found rows of humming servers connected to massive screens displaying live feeds of the robots. There, Rachel pointed to a glowing panel marked Central Control. Chuck approached it cautiously, pulling out a small device designed to overload electronic systems. As he attached it to the panel, alarms began blaring throughout the lab. They know we're here, Rachel warned. Almost done, Chuck muttered, working quickly. Guards stormed into the room surrounding them. Chuck finished connecting the device just as the first guard lunged at him. Without hesitation, he activated the overload, causing sparks to fly from the servers. The screens went dark, and the hum of electricity faded into silence. The robots were shut down, for now. Let's go, Chuck shouted, grabbing Rachel's hand. Dodging gunfire, they sprinted out of the lab and back into the labyrinthine corridors of the hotel. Behind them, shouts echoed as the guards gave chase. Chuck led the way, relying on his instincts to guide them to safety. Finally, they emerged into the cool night air, collapsing onto the pavement outside. For a moment, neither of them spoke, simply catching their breath. We did it, Rachel said softly. For now, at least. Chuck nodded, staring back at the hotel. This isn't over, he said, but we've bought ourselves some time. Together, they disappeared into the shadows, ready to face whatever came next. The explosion in the server room sent shockwaves through the entire hotel. Alarms blared louder than ever, and thick smoke billowed into the corridors. Chuck and Rachel stumbled out of the chaos, coughing but alive. They had succeeded in shutting down the central server, disabling the robots for now. But as they fled deeper into the building, they realized they weren't alone. Someone was waiting for them. Dr. Alan Harper, the mastermind behind Project Titan, stepped out from the shadows. He was an older man with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. His white lab coat was stained with soot, but he carried himself with authority. In one hand, he held a small remote control device, its blinking red light suggesting it was connected to something dangerous. Well, Harper said, his voice dripping with mockery. If it isn't our meddling intruders, you've caused quite a bit of trouble tonight. Chuck pushed Rachel slightly behind him, positioning himself between her and Harper. It's over, Chuck said firmly. Your project is done. Those robots are useless without your systems. Harper chuckled darkly. You think destroying a few servers will stop progress? You underestimate humanity's drive for power. Even if you dismantle this facility, someone else will pick up where I left off. Rachel stepped forward, her expression defiant. Not if we expose what you're doing. The world deserves to know the truth about Project Titan, and about people like you. Harper's smile faded, replaced by a look of icy determination. I admire your courage, Ms. Investigative Journalist, he sneered, glancing at Rachel. But courage won't save you. With that, he pressed a button on the remote. Instantly, the deactivated robots lying on the floor began to stir. Their metallic limbs twitched, and their blank faces lit up with glowing eyes. Chuck and Rachel exchanged a glance, realizing the horrifying truth. Harper had a backup system. You didn't really think I'd let my life's work be undone so easily, did you? Harper taunted. These prototypes may not have full functionality yet, but they're more than capable of dealing with nuisances like you. The robots rose to their feet, moving with jerky precision. Their movements were unsettling, almost. Human, but not quite. Chuck clenched his fists, ready to fight despite the odds. Stay close, he whispered to Rachel. The first robot lunged at them, its metal arms reaching out like claws. Chuck sidestepped quickly, grabbing a nearby chair and smashing it into the robot's torso. Sparks flew as the machine staggered backward but didn't fall. It recovered too quickly, proving itself far stronger than any ordinary opponent. Rachel scanned the room desperately, searching for anything they could use as a weapon or escape route. Her gaze landed on a large piece of debris, a chunk of broken machinery lying near the wall. Without hesitation, she grabbed it and hurled it at another advancing robot, striking it squarely in the head. The impact dented its faceplate, temporarily disabling it. Meanwhile, Chuck fought off two more robots simultaneously. Using his agility, he dodged their attacks and countered with powerful strikes. One punch sent a robot crashing into a table, scattering tools across the floor. Another kick knocked a second robot off balance, giving Chuck enough time to grab a wrench and smash it into the robot's exposed wiring. Despite their efforts, however, the robots kept coming. For every one they managed to disable, another seemed to activate. Harper watched the battle unfold with detached amusement, occasionally pressing buttons on his remote to direct the robot's movements. This is pointless, Harper called out. You can't win. Why waste your energy fighting the inevitable? Chuck ignored him, focusing instead on protecting Rachel. She was resourceful and brave, but these machines were relentless. Together they backed toward the exit, hoping to find a way out before they were overwhelmed. Just as things seemed hopeless, Alex, the IT guy who had helped them earlier, appeared in the doorway. His face was pale and he looked terrified, but he held a laptop in his hands. I disabled the backup system, he shouted, slamming his fingers onto the keyboard. At his command, the robots froze mid-motion, their glowing eyes dimming until they went completely dark. The sudden silence was deafening. Harper's smug expression faltered. What have you done? He demanded, glaring at Alex. I'm sorry, Dr. Harper, Alex replied, his voice trembling but resolute. I couldn't let you keep hurting people. Enraged, Harper lunged at Alex, but Chuck intercepted him, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the wall. It's over, Chuck growled. Your game is finished. Harper struggled briefly but stopped resisting, knowing he was outnumbered. With Rachel and Alex watching, Chuck secured Harper using cables torn from the damaged equipment. Once the scientist was immobilized, Chuck turned to the others. We need to get out of here, he said. This place isn't safe anymore. They hurried out of the lab, retracing their steps through the hotel's winding corridors. Smoke still filled the air, and the sound of distant explosions suggested the building's structural integrity was failing. As they neared the main lobby, they encountered Matt and Lisa, both looking frantic. What's going on? Matt asked, his usual confidence replaced by fear. No time to explain, Rachel replied. Just follow us if you want to live. Without waiting for a response, Chuck led the group outside where emergency vehicles had already arrived. Firefighters and police officers swarmed the area, evacuating guests and staff. Amid the commotion, Chuck spotted Rachel pulling out her phone. "I'm calling my editor," she explained. "The world needs to hear about this." Chuck nodded approvingly. "Do what you have to do," he said. "But remember, this fight isn't over. There are others like Harper out there, waiting for their chance." As dawn broke over the horizon, Chuck stood apart from the crowd, staring back at the burning hotel. His boots were scuffed, his suit torn, but his spirit remained unbroken. Beside him, Rachel approached, her notebook in hand. "So, what's next for you, John Carter?" she asked with a faint smile. Chuck tipped his hat slightly. "Wherever the road takes me," he replied, "and wherever there's a fight worth having." With that, he walked away, disappearing into the rising sun. The morning after the chaos at the Skyview Heights Hotel brought a strange mix of relief and unease. Chuck Norris, or rather, John Carter, stood on a hill overlooking the city as dawn painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Smoke still curled into the air from the ruins of the hotel, a stark reminder of the battle that had taken place just hours before. For most people, it would have been an exhausting ordeal, but Chuck felt only a deep satisfaction. He had done what he came to do, expose the truth and stop a dangerous operation. Still, he knew better than to believe this was truly the end. Projects like Titan didn't exist in isolation. There were always others, people with money, power, and ambition who would pick up where Harper left off. The world wasn't short on villains, and Chuck understood that fighting them was a never-ending journey. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace, watching the sun rise higher in the sky. Back near the hotel, Rachel stood among the crowd of reporters and emergency workers, her notebook clutched tightly in her hands. She had already made several calls to her editor, providing details about Project Titan and the illegal experiments conducted within the hotel. Her voice carried both urgency and determination as she recounted everything she had witnessed alongside. "Chuck, people need to know," she told herself under her breath. "They deserve to know." But even as she worked to uncover the full story, Rachel couldn't help glancing toward the edge of the scene, where Chuck had disappeared. He hadn't stayed long enough to answer questions or bask in the aftermath of their victory. Instead, he had simply walked away, leaving behind only faint footprints on the cobblestones. Rachel finally caught sight of him in the distance, standing alone against the backdrop of the rising sun. She hesitated, unsure whether to approach him. Part of her wanted answers, to understand who he really was and why he seemed so comfortable stepping into danger without looking back. But another part of her sensed that some mysteries were better left unsolved. With a heavy sigh, she turned her attention back to the task at hand. The hotel's destruction had drawn national attention, and authorities were scrambling to piece together what had happened. Firefighters continued to douse the flames, while police officers questioned witnesses and detained key figures involved in the operation, including Dr. Harper. Meanwhile, news vans lined the streets, their cameras capturing every detail of the unfolding drama. For Matt and Lisa, the night's events were surreal. Both had played minor roles in the conspiracy, knowingly or not, and now they faced intense scrutiny from investigators. Matt, once so confident and charming, looked shaken as he answered questions about his connections to the project. Lisa, too, seemed overwhelmed, her earlier judgmental attitude replaced by fear and regret. Neither of them fully understood the scope of what they had been part of, but they knew it would haunt them for years to come. As the day wore on, the focus shifted to damage control. Government officials issued statements condemning the illegal activities at the hotel, promising transparency and accountability. Yet beneath their polished words lay hints of deeper corruption, threads leading to powerful organizations and shadowy figures who preferred to operate in secret. Rachel knew her work was far from finished. Exposing Harper was just the beginning. Chuck, meanwhile, continued walking. He moved through the city streets with purpose, his boots clicking softly against the pavement. People passed by him, oblivious to the fact that this unassuming man had single-handedly dismantled a deadly operation. To them, he was just another face in the crowd, a traveler passing through town. And that was exactly how Chuck liked it. Eventually, he found himself at a small diner tucked away on a quiet corner. The smell of coffee and bacon wafted through the air as he stepped inside. It was early, and the place was nearly empty except for a few truck drivers sipping coffee at the counter. Chuck slid into a booth by the window, ordering a cup of black coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs. As he ate, he reflected on everything that had happened. The mission had tested his skills, not just his ability to fight but also his capacity to trust others. Rachel had proven herself a valuable ally, someone who shared his commitment to justice. And Alex, despite his initial reluctance, had shown courage when it mattered most. Even Matt and Lisa, flawed though they were, had reminded him that everyone played a role in the larger story. When he finished his meal, Chuck paid the bill and stepped back outside. The streets were busier now, alive with the sounds of cars honking and pedestrians chatting. He adjusted his hat, shielding his eyes from the bright sunlight, and started walking again. Before leaving the city entirely, he stopped by a payphone. Inserting a coin, he dialed a familiar number. On the other end, a gruff voice answered. "Mission accomplished," Chuck said simply. There was a pause on the line, followed by a low chuckle. "You always deliver, don't you?" "I do my best," Chuck replied. "Well, your best is good enough for us. Take some time to rest. You've earned it." Chuck hung up without saying goodbye. Rest sounded appealing, but he doubted it would last long. There were always more missions, more secrets to uncover, and more battles to fight. That was the life he had chosen, and he wouldn't trade it for anything. Later that afternoon, Rachel managed to track him down one last time. She found him sitting on a park bench overlooking a fountain, feeding breadcrumbs to pigeons. "You're hard to keep up with," she said, smiling faintly as she approached. Chuck glanced up at her, tipping his hat. "I get that a lot." "So this is goodbye?" she asked, her tone tinged with curiosity. "For now," he replied. "But remember, the world's full of stories waiting to be told. Maybe our paths will cross again." Rachel nodded, sensing there was no point in pressing him further. "Take care of yourself, John Carter." "You too, Rachel," he said, standing up. "And don't stop chasing the truth. It's worth it." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the flow of people moving through the park. Rachel watched him go, feeling a strange mix of admiration and gratitude. Whoever Chuck Norris truly was, she knew he was someone extraordinary. As the day faded into evening, Chuck reached the outskirts of the city. He paused briefly, gazing back at the skyline. The hotel was gone, reduced to ash and rubble, but its shadow lingered in the minds of those who had uncovered its secrets. Chuck knew the fight against corruption and greed would continue, but for now he allowed himself a small smile. He tipped his hat to the horizon, then climbed into a waiting pickup truck. Starting the engine, he drove off into the sunset, ready for whatever came next. Because for Chuck Norris, the road ahead was always calling, and he wouldn't have it any other way.